Guess what? We did it. The Fiscal Act has been officially signed into law, ending the 80-year-old cow's milk mandate and paving the way for a fairer food system that honors choice for all kids. Now, the students in the National School Lunch Program can choose plant-based milk with their meals rather than millions and millions of cartons of cow's milk being wasted and thrown away in the trash because kids do not want it. And now, the fun part happens. We are hitting the road with the Justice Tour. This is an exciting new education initiative from Switch for Good that will enlighten middle and high school students on how a dairy-free lifestyle supports their health, compassion, and human performance. The policy change was a multi-years-long battle, and we are now prepared to keep fighting to see this change come to life in schools across the United States. We plan to bring powerful science-based education about health, performance, and dietary justice to school dietitians, district leaders, students, teachers, and parents nationwide, and your continued faith in us helps fuel our movement toward a future where every child thrives without dairy. So we are taking this life-changing message on the road in a very cool, brand new VW ID Buzz, that's the new VW bus, plastered with the Switch for Good logo and messaging, and it's totally electric. So let's map a future where free choice for kids also means freedom for cows. Go to switchforgood.org, that's switch numeral for good.org/justice-tour to learn more details. We want you to help us blast off this year with this nationwide tour by giving us a generous tax-deductible donation. It helps us keep going and reach as many people as possible. So help us build gratitude, help us build momentum, help us build a sustainable, compassionate future for the kids and for the cows. The power is in our hands as a movement. Go to switchforgood.org and make your generous donation now. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Switch for Good podcast. Today on the pod, we are very, very excited to be joined by a guest who is shaping the future and modeling what's possible in education. Michele Fasnacht is the founder and director of the Rock Solid Community School in Florida, one of only 2 fully plant-based K-12 schools in the entire United States, and the only one to weave a plant-based kitchen, on-site chef, an animal sanctuary into every school day. Michele's life is a story of resilience and transformation, from surviving severe childhood trauma and chronic illness, including progressive MS and lupus. She reclaimed her health through plant-based living. And by the way, removing dairy from her diet played a pivotal role in her recovery. Well, now she's shaping the next generation of leaders through her values-driven curriculum and sharing her insights on food, wellness, and sustainability on her podcast, Plant the Change. So get ready to hear how one visionary educator has turned empathy, ethics, and learning into a compelling blueprint for a more humane and sustainable world. Michele, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. One thing I want to start with is it's Solid Rock Community School.
Solid Rock Community School.
Yes.
Beautiful. And you're in Florida, yes?
We are in Florida. We are specifically in Tarpon Springs, Florida.
Okay. So that, for a lot of people who hear that, they might think a vegan school in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Yeah. What inspired you to do this and why there? That's my first thing is like, this is something that clearly, as we said in the intro, only 2 schools in the US are taking this approach. Why this approach and why there?
First of all, let me start by saying when I started Solid Rock Community School, it was 2004, and it was long before I was vegan or plant-based. So I started Solid Rock Community School in 2004, and I really started it because of my own childhood experiences. So I was a kid who I faced relentless bullying, abuse, assault, and a lot of trauma. And so when I became a mother, I really wanted my children to grow up in a world where they felt safe. And I wanted them to have different experiences than I did. So we tried public schools, private schools, and homeschooling, and they all had good components, but they still didn't align with the values that I wanted for my family and the experiences and safety I was looking for my personal kids. So I realized what I was looking for didn't exist, so I decided to create it. So when I started the school more than 22 years ago, it was really with a simple goal of helping kids feel safe and teaching kindness in an environment for my own kids and for whatever other kids decided to join us. It was literally very personal when I first started it. It grew into something completely different. It's a different school today than what it was 22 years ago. Over that time, as I grew, the school evolved with me. So that's how Solid Rock Community School began. And it was a school built to raise children who could grow into a kind, compassionate citizens of the world. That's where it started.
Absolutely beautiful. How would you describe the environment at the school? We're talking about values of ethics and compassion, but give us a description of what it's like to actually be there. What is the environment you've created now in present day in 2026? How does it feel there?
I use examples of what other people say about our school, actually. So I'm here every day, so it's my life. And so I almost a little bit take it for granted because it's so normalized for me. I really recognize how different the environment is when other people come here to visit. So we have people that come on the campus to take a tour. And we had a family come in one time to take a tour, and they were here from New York. And they were walking around the campus, and the teenage girl was going, "This is like Disney being here." And she was saying that because it was just happy. People were smiling. It was happy. It was just really inclusive environment of a lot of different people who get along really well. And so our school is very inclusive. We have kids from all backgrounds of society, all races, all religions, and it's really a peaceful, wonderful place. And it's just the norm of what it is here. It's very, very different. We interview teachers all the time, and they come in and they talk about the problems that they're experiencing where they're working. And, we hear of kids throwing chairs and these terrible fist fights and all this craziness. And I want to be clear that we're a school with kids, so it's not perfect, right? Whenever you have a place with a lot of people, it's never going to be perfect. You still have issues, but we do not have the issues that they're seeing in other environments and other schools. And it's really because of the compassionate culture that we have in the school. It's the way that we deal with problems, the way that we handle things. You really feel it from the minute you walk in the doors.
That's beautiful. You mentioned, the conflict that occurs in other school systems and what other teachers have been exposed to and perhaps other students. What's your system and approach to things like conflict resolution, communication skills, and making sure that people see each other's point of view? How does that go there?
Wow, that's like my favorite stuff,
Okay,
actually.
great.
So that deals with the way that we teach, and that's with Compassionate Humane Education, and it's what we call CHE, C-H-E. And actually, I developed Compassionate Humane Education, and it's an approach that I developed working in the education system, and what I've put in process here. And it's really something that took a long time to really get to exactly what I wanted, because working with kids isn't easy. Working with human beings is difficult. The world is challenging. So Compassionate Humane Education. I think most people are familiar with the terms humane education, and that describes what we're teaching. So that's lessons that nurture kindness, responsibility, and respect for people, animals, and the planet. Compassionate is how we're teaching it. We teach with patience, understanding, and care. Because if you're teaching humane education and you're doing it in a way where you're punitive and you're argumentative and where you're unkind, it's really kind of a conflict of interest, right? You're trying to teach people to be kind, so you really have to do it in a kind way. So Compassionate Humane Education is just as much about how we're teaching as it is about what we're teaching. Chi is not a separate curriculum. It's literally a framework that's infused into our school culture and into every classroom. You don't replace existing lessons, you enrich what you're doing. So, for example, a science class that's already studying ecosystems by exploring how animal habitats are affected by pollution, or a math class might calculate feed ratios for rescued animals. It's a different way of taking the same lesson, but integrating and intentionally connecting things that affect humans, animals, and our environment, and helping students see how these choices directly impact them and the world around them. So after literally many years of trial, pivot, and refinement, we formalized the Chi framework. And now we actually have it available to other schools, churches, after-school clubs, sanctuaries. It's really cool. We're really trying to change education as a whole. So that, just so you know, Chi, we have a website, Chi, C-H-E, impact.org, if anyone wants to learn more about that.
There is nothing more frustrating than feeling like your body is working against you. Digestive troubles, gut pain, skin issues, constant congestion, yet never knowing what's causing these issues. If that sounds familiar, it's time for you to take our new gut health quiz. In just 3 minutes, you will find out if dairy is behind your symptoms like diarrhea, heartburn, constipation, bloating, acne, or the never-ending mucus. And here's the good news. There is a solution. You don't have to keep living with these symptoms. Take the quiz, get answers, and start feeling like yourself again. Take the 3-minute gut health quiz today at switch4good.org/gut-health-quiz. Again, that's switch4good.org/gut-health-quiz and start feeling better today. Awesome. Thank you, Michele. We'll link to that in the show notes for sure. As you're talking about this Chi framework and the refinement of it and developing it over all of these years, how have you seen this framework change how students not only regard themselves or their self-image, but how they regard ultimately their families and the world? How has it affected not only them on a personal level, but that broader family and world framework?
So that's a really great question, and it actually goes back to the other question that you asked that I still didn't completely address. So I'm going to kind of work them in together. So let me give you an example of something that we do with Chi. Okay. One of the biggest obstacles that we're facing right now in society is the way people communicate to one another, the way they treat one another. I don't know what has happened, but it has gotten worse and worse. And it's actually heartbreaking. And if we don't start changing it with our youth now, it's going to continue to get worse and worse. And we are normalizing disrespect. We're just normalizing these things that will not make for a productive future society, right? So in our school environment, we deal with things so differently. And you really have to do this with intention. And a traditional school is not going to do this because it takes effort and it takes people, and they just generally do not have the ability to do things like this. And so in our school, for instance, when we have students that are dealing with interpersonal issues, we deal with it within the Chi framework, right? And we do something, we have things in our framework, they're called reset circles and reflection circles. And even if you've ever heard these terms before, the way that we use them is very, very specific to Chi. So I'm going to give you 2 examples that are this year. They're recently, actually. I could give so many. There's always good ones all the time. It was the beginning of the school year, and we had a parent call. And she said, my kindergarten daughter, who's new in the school, has friends in the school that are bullying her, and she's crying and she does not want to come back to school. And we said, okay, we'll take care of it. So I called that little kindergartner in with her 2 kindergarten friends. I think one was kindergarten, one was 1st grade. And then another child in the school who's a 3rd grader. And she's what I call an ambassador of the school because she's just so amazing. And she just understands the culture 100%. So I call these 3 little girls into what's called a reflection circle, and we sit down and intentionally, this is very intentional and purposeful when it's done. So I explain to them the rules of the reflection circle, and then I say to the little girl, the one whose mother called, I said, tell me what's going on. And she says, well, they said they are beautiful princesses because they're wearing long pants, and I'm wearing shorts, so I'm not a beautiful princess. And I said, okay, so what else? And there was nothing else. That was it. And I said, okay. I looked at the other 2 girls, and I actually did understand what was going on. I don't know if you've picked up on it yet, but I understood. So I look at the other little girls and I said, do you understand why she's upset? And they both looked at me like, they had no clue. And so these are young kids, so I had to do more talking for them than I would do if it was older children. And I said, well, I think it's because she was wearing shorts and you were saying you're beautiful princesses because you're wearing long pants. So she felt like you were telling her she's not a beautiful princess and that she's not accepted and she doesn't fit in. And they're like, no, that's not what we were saying at all, you know? And what was really cool is the 3rd grader jumps in and she says, I think everybody's a beautiful princess. Just some people are beautiful princesses wearing shorts and some people are beautiful princesses wearing long pants. And the 2 girls go, yeah, that's right. And then the little girl goes, oh, that's right. And they're all like, yay, yay, we're all happy. Everybody was happy. So simple. Okay, that is so simple, right? But here's the thing. That little girl, the one that was upset, she went home crying. She didn't want to come back to school. And what sounds like such a minor incident, because we are adults dealing with health issues and financial problems and deaths in families and these serious, serious issues we're dealing with. When we hear something like that at home, it can really sound not that important. Or even in school, in most schools, they would brush that off and they would say to the girls, don't say it again. You know, or they would tell the other girl, don't worry about it, or whatever. We take the time to sit there and work with them and help them learn how to communicate how they're feeling and help the others learn how to listen to how they're feeling and how to respond to it. And then we have the 3rd grader who's the ambassador who jumps in to be a voice for the peers, and they work through these situations. And what it is doing, it's teaching the child who feels harmed to have a voice and to speak how they feel. And it's teaching the other children who did the harming, whether it was accidental or on purpose, to listen and then to respond. And it's teaching witnesses and bystanders to involve themselves. It's really, really powerful. So let me give you another example. I had a teenage student who came to me and said, Miss Michele, can I ask for a reflection circle? This boy is driving me crazy. I can't take it anymore. And I said, absolutely. All right. Normally, this would go to the principal's office. The boy would just get in trouble and be sent on his way. So I sit down with the teenagers and I ask the girls, say how you're feeling. And she says to the boy, I am so sick and tired of the way that you're talking to me. You keep body shaming me. You make fun of me. I don't like it. I wish you would stop doing it. It's embarrassing and blah, blah, blah. I don't like it. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm saying things to you because we're friends and I'm playing and I'm saying it and you're laughing. And then you give it right back to me and we just go back and forth. It's fun. And she's like, it is not fun. And he's like, then why are you laughing? And she goes, because it's embarrassing and you're doing it in front of my friends and I don't know what else to do. And he's literally like, I don't understand. And so I said to him, sometimes when people are embarrassed and upset, they don't want to say anything in front of their friends. And I'm explaining this to him and he's looking at me like, what? Like he's never heard this before. The fact that she was laughing and like giving it back to him, he felt like they're good friends and they're goofing around. And meanwhile, she's hating him. He thinks they're good friends. She's hating him. They are totally communicating differently. And he has no clue. So he's like, wow, I literally didn't know any of this. And I was like, so what can we do moving forward? And that's always the goal, is to figure out how do we move forward so there's no more harm happening. And so they make an agreement. He's not going to say these kind of things to her anymore because he's realizing they're upsetting her. But he made sure to say, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to try my best not to do it, but I might still do it. And what if I still do it? I'm doing it not to be mean. I just don't even realize it's an issue. And she goes, well, then if you do it again, how about I just say, that's what I'm talking about? And he's like, yes, yes. If I will try my hardest to be aware and not do it again. But if I do, and I just tell me, don't do that. That's what I'm talking about. And I promise I won't. And so they make that agreement. They shake hands, and then I write it up and they both sign it. And never happened again after that. And just so you know, the issue with the little girls in that situation didn't happen again. So it's like, as they go through this process, it doesn't happen anymore. And then, there are that rare occasion where it does happen a second time and we need to talk about it more, but almost always it is a one-time situation that you sit down and work through. And then guess what happens is they take this one into life. It's not just a one-time thing sitting there with me. They've now learned how people communicate differently. They've learned how to talk through issues and problems. They've learned how to compromise. They've learned how to make agreements. It is amazing because it works so beyond that little circle at that little moment of time.
This is absolutely beautiful. It really reminds me, Michele, of a lot of conversations I've been having lately with friends of mine who are actively reimagining community. And we've talked a lot lately about this sense of belonging, the practice of repair and communication, and also being witnessed, how powerful it is to be witnessed, right, in our experience. And the fact that you're building those things in your community, in your framework, you said, these are skills and experiences that these children can then take into their lives. The fact that you're doing that at such a young age is such a valuable thing to imprint, because certainly, with the advent and the explosion of social media and AI, and thinking that these relationships on screens are enough, you're giving them actual real world skills in, like I said, communication, belonging, repair, and being witnessed. This is absolutely incredible. And
let me tell you, when I started doing this with students, it wasn't popular at first, right? They were like, they would see me coming and they'd kind of run. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get pulled into a reflection circle. They didn't know if they did something and they were going to be pulled in, or they're going to be a witness, or they're going to be an ambassador. They didn't know. And now I get a line of kids asking for reflection circles because they want to work through issues. And most of the issues, like I said, as a grown-up, you would look at them and they're so minimal from a grown-up standpoint, right? Because we're dealing with such big issues. But let me tell you something, these issues are big to these kids. I remember when I was relentlessly bullied in elementary school, there was this boy named Sam. Every day he would torture me. And I think, gosh, if one time we could have had a reflection circle, it could have changed the whole course of my elementary experience. Then I remember my oldest daughter, she was in elementary school in New York, and she would come home crying almost daily from a little boy in school who was teasing her about her jacket and her book bag and her lunchbox. And she was so upset every day. And I would go into the school and I would try to talk to the teacher, and this teacher didn't care at all about this. And I think, gosh, if someone would have just stopped and said, let me take the 30 minutes to put into this, I could end it for the whole year. And teachers don't have the time to do it. And principals, they don't have the time to do it. It's really about time, and people just don't want to take the time. But we need to take the time, because if we can take that 10 minutes or 30 minutes, we can literally end something for long term. I mean, it can literally end a relationship that is failing, struggling, and suffering that may go on for years. and end it in a one-time sitting. It can take kids and change their method of communication and their method of compromising to make them not just better students and better children at home, but it can make them better relationships with their peers, with their future husbands, better parents, better leaders, better coworkers, better employees. I mean, all of these experiences change us to who we are. And if we can't stop and take the time to do these things, and all we're doing is focusing on math and academics, we're going to raise kids who can't function in society. And we've already got a lot of people who can't function in society. We've got to change the path. We've got to change the trajectory that our world is headed to. I mean, it's really scary out there, and it's not looking better right now. We've got to stop, and we've got to prioritize. And education and academics is absolutely important, but communication and relationships are also very, very important.
Yeah, I really wish I would have had this approach growing up. Certainly, the kind of skills you're learning, I personally learned much later in life as an adult, and glad that I did. We're speaking a very similar language, but that the fact that you're starting so young is what's remarkable.
Well, and let me tell you one more thing on that.
Yeah.
It is much easier to learn when you're younger than to break bad habits when you're older.
Sure. Yes. Don't we all know?
It's so much harder to break bad habits, much easier to learn younger. So I love this about our school. And like I said, I really don't want it to be something that's just at Solid Rock. I really want it to be something that is part of education as a whole. And that's why I talk about it on my podcast. That's why the Chi framework is available for others, because it can't just be something that's in one place. It needs to be something that we are literally reimagining education, right? We're changing the way education is looked at. Kids are in school 6 hours a day. We have such an opportunity to infuse these things into that day. And honestly, it's almost like education malpractice when we don't. You know, take those opportunities, take those times of peer problems and turn them around and make them peer experiences that can now benefit these students for the rest of their life.
Yeah. I mean, building on this, you know, you're obviously approaching this from a mental level, a spiritual level, a relational level. And when we drill down and again talk about one of the other very unique things about the experience at your school, you've got this fully plant-based kitchen, you've got an on-site chef, you have an animal sanctuary. And why was it important for you in crafting this vision to embed these experiences into the daily lived experiences rather than just teaching them theoretically?
Okay, so first let me start about going plant-based, okay, because there are two totally different reasons. All right, so the plant-based part of my story came many years later after starting the school. I'd always been interested in health. And back in the 90s, a long time ago, I became a licensed naturopath, and I was very connected to holistic wellness. But despite that, and everything I knew and learned at that time, everything I practiced, I still became really sick. And I was losing pieces of myself day by day by day. And after struggling with health issues for decades, and years of doctors and misdiagnoses, I was finally diagnosed with progressive MS and lupus. And at this time, I was really sick and disabled. My life was so challenging, and I had the school at this time, and I could barely walk. At times, I was walking with a cane. I was legally blind. I was aspirating on food, on drinks. It was so bad. At times I had dysphagia and I was aspirating on my own saliva. I was in severe pain. I was preparing for end of the life decisions through Death with Dignity. It was really, really bad. That's like, it was beyond any words I can give you in this short moment. At this time of my life, I'd been vegetarian for decades at this point. But one night, it was a little over 10 years ago, I was laying in bed and I was watching a Facebook video of a mother cow having her baby taken away from her. And that baby was crying for her mother, and the mother was crying for the baby. And they were taking the baby and feeding the baby soy milk instead of the mother's own milk. And everything I was hearing at this moment, it was the first time I was ever hearing this. And I was really in shock because here they are, they're both crying for one another. They're both very visibly upset. Baby's getting soy milk, and I'm learning that this process is going to continue over and over again for about 3 to 4 years until the industry calls this dairy cow spent, and then they send her to slaughter. I was literally devastated. God, even every time I talk about this, it still devastates me. Because at this point in my life, I still believed that happy cows give milk. I don't even understand how I could be that age and still believing something so stupid. But I did, like the majority of society. And that video literally opened my eyes and my heart, and I couldn't believe it. And I started doing the research, and gosh, the stuff I was learning was blowing my eyes. I just couldn't believe it. It blew my mind. I learned that dairy is the most cruel of all the industries because it has the longest suffering. It's actually horrific. So at that moment, I actually went vegan for ethical reasons. And I removed dairy. So I did that for ethical reasons. But then here's what happened. That was on a Friday. I remember this very clearly. It was Friday night. Sunday morning, so it was 48 hours later, not even quite 48 hours later, it was Sunday morning. I noticed when I woke up that morning that some of my MS symptoms were not there. And these were MS symptoms I had for decades. So numbness, tingling, brain fog, heavy legs. I didn't have it. And the only thing that had happened to me was removing dairy. That was it. And so I was telling my husband, I was like, I don't know what's going on. And so I started researching. I jumped on the computer and started researching the connection between dairy and MS, autoimmune disease, and dairy, cheese, because I was a big cheese addict. That's what I did every day. I used cheese every day. And so I'm researching dairy and MS, dairy and autoimmune disease, MS and chronic illness. I'm just back and forth looking at all these things, and I couldn't believe what I was finding. I was literally shocked. Countless peer-reviewed studies, countless medical testimonials that were linking dairy to inflammation, hormonal imbalance, digestive issues, neurological symptoms. I couldn't believe it because I had been sick for decades. I had been through dozens of doctors over 6 different states. No one had ever mentioned any of this to me. So I just want to share some of the things I learned because it was shocking. So dairy is one of the most inflammatory foods we consume. Dairy proteins like casein, they're strongly linked to chronic inflammation, and studies have shown that removing dairy can improve everything from joint pain to skin conditions to energy levels. Casein and whey proteins in milk can trigger inflammatory responses. Chronic inflammation is associated with heart disease, autoimmune disease, and metabolic disorders. Dairy contains over 60 natural hormones, even in organic milk, all of which stimulate the human endocrine and immune systems. It's one of the top triggers of autoimmune flares, sinus and respiratory issues, migraines, and digestive disorders. I didn't know this, but it still goes on. Keep listening. Up to 70% of people worldwide are lactose intolerant, which is really just the body telling us we're not meant to consume dairy, let alone the milk of another species. Symptoms can include bloating, gas, diarrhea, stomach pain, and inflammation. Lactose tolerance is actually the exception. Dairy is associated with weight gain. Regular consumption of high-fat dairy, cheese, whole milk, ice cream, it's linked to high calorie intake because these foods are calorie dense. They're high in saturated fat. And dairy also raises insulin and IGF-1 hormones that promote fat storage. Studies show that shifting from animal fats, including dairy, to whole plant foods is associated with lower body weight and reduced risk of obesity in both children and adults. Dairy is linked to acne. Multiple studies associate milk with higher rates of acne in teens and adults. Likely reason, milk increases IGF-1 and insulin, both of which stimulate oil production and inflammation in the skin. Dairy is linked to high risk of certain cancers, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer. Milk naturally contains hormones, even organic milk, estrogen, progesterone, IGF-1. I mean, it's just crazy. It still goes on. Dairy is high in saturated fat. It raises your LDL, which is your bad cholesterol. And we know that elevated LDL is known risk factor for what? Heart disease. I mean, come on. Calcium from dairy is not necessary for bone health. And when we grew up, at least me, people at my age, we were told milk does a body good. Milk is great for bones, all those things. It's not true. Countries with low dairy intake have lower fracture rates than high dairy countries. We know now that what actually protects bones best is vitamin D, weight-bearing exercise, leafy greens, beans, sesame, and fortified plant milks. Dairy is associated with digestive problems beyond lactose. Even lactose-tolerant people can experience mucus production, sinus congestion, reflux, and IBS flare-ups. What is cow's milk designed for? It is designed for baby cows. It is meant to turn a 100-pound calf into a 1,000-pound cow quickly. It's not meant or appropriate for adult humans or any humans. So now let's go back to me for a second. Dairy can worsen autoimmune conditions. So people with, like me, MS or rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, they report improvement when they remove dairy, probably because of the reduced inflammation and immune reactivity. So my experience, what I learned wasn't unusual, but it was something I never was told before. So again, I had been sick for decades. Decades. Are you hearing me? Decades of my life I was sick. I went to doctors after doctors after doctors across numerous states. Not one doctor ever mentioned what I was consuming, whether it was anything. I think once a doctor did tell me to increase my water intake. That was the only thing I ever heard.
That's all they had, huh?
That's all they had. Nothing else was ever said in decades. And so here I give up dairy because I'm already vegetarian. So do remember that. I give up dairy, which was something I was consuming every day in cheese form. And 48 hours later, my health is improving. And it's not like 100% of everything went away in 48 hours, but it was notable improvement. The majority of things were gone. And then when I looked them up, it was right there. I was seeing other people have experienced the same thing and seeing scientific evidence. Yet I was never told. It was shocking. So that now goes into the next part. All right. So here I am. I am now vegan and I'm plant-based. Vegan for animals, plant-based for health. And that shift changed my everything. I began seeing every part of life and the world differently. So from my home, my choices, and especially in the school that I started. I'd always been compassionate, but now I saw compassion through a whole nother lens. So when I started looking at what students were eating for lunch, I was literally heartbroken. The meals that were coming from the county that were given to my school, they were filled with animal products and foods that cost animals their lives and harmed children's health. And half of it was being thrown away in the trash. And I would go home and I literally would get into bed at night and I would say, how can I keep doing this? God, it doesn't go away, that feeling, because the guilt that I had, because at this point I knew, right? I didn't know before this. At this point I knew, and I just would lay in bed and cry with guilt. And I would say, I gotta find a way to change this. I can't do this. I literally was like, if I can't change this, I can't keep running this school. And I reached out to our county about the food that they were sending us and about getting plant-based meals. And that was a joke. That was a no. And I kept trying to find a solution. And at this point, we were in rental properties and they didn't have commercial kitchens. So our kids only brought their lunches or they were dropped off by the county. And then in 2019, we bought our own school campus. And when we bought it, it had a commercial kitchen. And at that moment, I knew what I had to do. And so we stopped getting food from the county, which meant getting the free meals that the NSLP provided. And we decided we were going to hire our own chef and have our own 100% plant-based kitchen. And we started working with plant-based doctors, lifestyle medicine doctors, and working with plant-based and vegan chefs. And we created a menu of healthy, kid-friendly meals. And I did this for animals. I did this for kids and their health. Because let me tell you something. Once you know better, you cannot pretend you don't. I mean, when you try, it is painful. I mean, God, I could not live with that guilt. I could not. I couldn't do it. The guilt of knowing that these animal products were just terrible in every single way, right? So when you're talking about obviously taking animals' lives and then half of the food's being thrown away, and then talking about how they can contribute to people's health and wellness later in life. So at this point, I had the power to make a change and I decided I'm doing it. Because just like me, every person can have hereditary and environmental factors that can predispose them to illness. And guess what? You don't necessarily know what it is. So when we know, and I know, that animal products are associated with higher risks of heart disease, inflammation, and all these other chronic conditions, I couldn't feel comfortable keeping them on the menu. And so that's why I chose to incorporate a school kitchen with 100% exclusive plant-based meals being offered to our students, because I had to be able to sleep at night, right? So I'm not here to control what anyone's eating. I'm here to educate. So families are always free to make their own food choices, but at school, what we are providing is intentionally chosen to provide only plant-based meals, because that's what I can serve with a clear conscience and be able to sleep at night. And also, just so you know, we also offer evening classes to our parents on health, wellness, and cooking, because parents are the ones buying food and preparing food at home. And our goal is simply to educate and empower, not to pressure. We just want families to have real, usable information and skills that they can use at home. We want to walk alongside our families, and we want to share what learning can be like when you're with friends and people who care. And we want to make food healthy and accessible, and we want to make plant-based cooking where it's not intimidating. So now we teach health, wellness, and compassion, and we serve food that reflects our values. And families can choose what they want, but what we serve from our kitchen is always going to align with our mission, and that's always to do better once we know better.
Beautiful, Michele. I'm super curious, you sharing all these tips on dairy and how embedded in the, especially American culture, it is to have animal foods on the table. It's associated with Americana. A lot of people have this nostalgia around meals that always have some form of animal product in them. So with this transition you made in 2019, how have you approached conversations with families who are either hesitant or have pushed back on this?
It's interesting because when families come to our school and they learn about things that we're doing, there's some families who will say, I'm going to use one as a perfect example. He said, my child's never going to eat anything on your menu. And I said, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. That's fine. They can pack their lunch and bring it. Ours is available if they want it. And he's like, I'm just letting you know. And I'm like, okay, because I know that once they're here, a couple things are going to happen. One, they're going to see all the other kids eating the food, and then they're going to want to try it. And usually they'll like it on their own and start wanting it on their own, right? Two, they're going to be learning things in classes and from hearing people talk. And it's going to take away any of those factors that are maybe predisposing them to be cautious about something. So this parent says they're never going to do it. And I say, okay, that's fine. Well, they can pack their own food. What we provide is always going to be plant-based and healthy. And he says, okay. Now, they enrolled over the summer. The school year starts. It's the first week of school. And I'm taking a video camera out and I'm going around and I'm watching some kids eat lunch. And I stopped at a table and I was asking kids how their lunch was. And this is so funny. I said, how are the foods? And one of the kids says, this is the most delicious food I've ever had. And I was like, oh, okay, that's great, blah, blah, blah. And so when I was done doing this, I went in to some of the other people, teachers in the school, and I said, who is this person? I didn't recognize this child at all. Who is this child that said this? This is the most delicious food I've ever had. And they said, oh, that's so-and-so. Well, this child over the summer had really long hair. And this is the one the father said would never eat our food. Okay, well, now this child has really short hair and I did not recognize them. When they told me who this child was, I literally, it's so funny. The parents said they'll never eat our food. It's the first week of school. They're eating our food and saying it's the most delicious food they've ever had. Amazing,
Awesome.
right?
Awesome.
Awesome. Now, this father, this is months later, one day he walks into the school office and he sits down and he sits on the chair and he's like, did you see what I just did? And I didn't know what he was talking about. I'm like, what? And he goes, I just sat down and crossed my legs. I haven't been able to do that in 5 years. And I was like, that's great. He's like, change the way I'm eating. And he goes, I'm still doing this and that, but I'm doing a lot more plants and a lot more this and a lot more that. And I was like, that's awesome. You're doing good. Keep doing that and keep increasing. Right. So look, I love to talk to people about what I think is the best thing to do. And I will talk until I can't talk anymore. But everybody listens at different rates and they hear some of what you're saying and they don't always take it all in. But I will continue to educate and I will continue to keep talking and I'll continue to do it in a way that doesn't make people feel like they're being judged. I want to help them understand. And I really, truly believe that education is the best way. So I think by sharing my story that people, that people relate, because people that are adults, people, particularly when they're over their 40s, they're either maybe having some of their own health issues or they have family members who do. So they're more open to listening about health issues. Kids couldn't care less about health issues, right? Kids care about animals. They care maybe about the environment. Kids just like food that tastes good. Adults care about health issues. You have to know your audience and you have to talk to them about things that they care about and things that they want to learn about. And you need to do it in a way to help them, not intimidate them. That's why not only do I share my story, but I also lead cooking classes and food demos. Because let me tell you something, food is the biggest addiction on this planet, in my opinion. It is so, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. It's on every TV show. It's on every commercial. It's everywhere you drive by and on billboards. It is so normalized. And if you want people to change their diet, particularly if they're not dealing with a health issue when they're an adult, you've got to show them some good tasting food so they don't feel like they're giving something up. They've got to learn that you're not giving that up. You're swapping it out. You're swapping it for this. And this can be just as amazing as that is, but here's why it's better. And when they can understand why it's better for human health, it's better for environment, it's better for world hunger, it's better for so many reasons. And hopefully some of those reasons also resonate to something important to them. Then they'll be willing to try and these changes. And I see families all the time. They change the way that they're living their lifestyle. So some go fully plant-based, some go fully vegan, some do not do it 100%, but 100%, all of them, 100%, all make changes. They all do. 100% of all of them make changes. They all do that. We watch documentaries as a school together. We assign them to parents to watch them from home. They're all learning. And when you learn, you do better. People just don't know. Look at me. I was 40 years old and I've got a good bit of education behind me, and I still thought happy cows gave milk. People just don't know. Their doctors don't talk to them about preventative medicine. Nobody's doing that. They have to learn. And so as an educator, I feel it's my responsibility to teach. And so I teach the kids and I teach the parents. And you teach, and then people make their own decisions. But at least you can sleep at night. If you know, you do the best that you can. You do the best with that knowledge that you have to share it with as many people as possible.
With all of these changes you've made, and especially nutritionally, what kind of changes have you seen in students, physical, emotional, cognitively, as you emphasize nourishment as part of the curriculum?
Well, what I see with kids is really their interest in food increases, their interest in understanding food. So obviously this is a little bit to do with age and grades and things like that of kids. But we have a school garden at our school. And so students are part of maintaining the school garden. It's a seed to table program. We use living classrooms in our school. So one of them is the school garden. And so they get to plant, water, harvest, and they take the food, the crops into the kitchen and give them to the chef, and then he uses them in the food. And then we have a culinary program who turns all these vegetables and fruits into meals, and they get to be part of it. So kids are learning what it's like to actually garden and to make food that's more sustainable and healthy. They're part of that. And then in being part of that, what happens is that students try foods that their parents maybe have never purchased before. Maybe they've never tried before. So it could be kale, okra, bok choy, things of not your, most people have had bananas and lettuce, right? So we have a big range of things that we are producing in our garden. And so now the kids want to try it. And so now they're tasting foods that they otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to do if they were just relying on the parents to buy it and bring it home. And they're more interested in tasting something that they planted and grew than they are something that just showed up on the school menu. So we really see kids being more willing to try different foods than they've ever had before. They're also more interested in learning about sustainability and being part of that whole process. And also through the garden, students also, they discover things like, who are the strongest and fastest and largest animals on Earth? Well, guess what? They're plant eaters, you know? So we talk about elephants, gorillas, horses, ox, and rhinos. And it's simple, but it's like these powerful lessons where plants give strength, fuel, and vitality, and not just to humans, but also to animals. And so we get to have these cool conversations. And so the garden becomes a place that's about nutrition, but it's also about connection. And it's lets students see the interconnectedness with everything going on. So they learn patience, responsibility, sustainability, and respect for the earth as well when they're part of this garden and part of this food program that we have here.
Amazing. To take this on a broader lens, you're doing something so unique, so innovative, based in real respect for people's emotional lives, the state of their health. But if we really zoom out here for a second, if you feel like more schools were to open up to the possibility, even a fraction of the philosophy you are creating there, what do you think could change, not only just in our education system here in the United States, but in society at large?
Well, that's the whole point of me creating the chief framework for other schools, because I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and it has been something over the 20 plus years of my work, a lot of pivots and a lot of movement to be able to put all of this together. And I wanted to make it easy for schools to pick and choose what they could actually bring into their school, because they're not going to be able to do everything that we're doing. They're not. I mean, not at first anyway, right? It's been a big road for us. It's going to be a big road for everybody, but they can find out what they can do. So when they look at the chief framework and they understand all these different components, and we need to get back to the animals in a minute, but when they look at the components of the human connection and the circles that we do with the kids, and the social emotional learning we do with the kids, and the food program and the animals and the animal sanctuary and all these different components, they can decide what's possible to integrate into their classroom or into their school. They don't have to do everything. But again, it's knowledge is power. So you need to understand it first. You understand it, and then you decide, what can I reasonably integrate in? And then you start integrating something. And then from there, you start somewhere, and then you add more as you can. And I continue to do that also. Believe me, I am doing so much, and I continue to do it. And that's why I'm talking to you, and I'm on your podcast, and I'm talking to others. And it's why I started a podcast, because I can't be the only one doing this. There's got to be other schools. And let me tell you something, there's a lot of schools doing a lot of great things about promoting different pieces of humane education and promoting social emotional learning. What I am doing is pulling all of these things together, and then I'm connecting all of these other pieces that aren't typically included. And when people can understand how all of these things, all of the interconnectedness works together, it makes it much easier to do, because it really is, this is an interconnected world we're in, and we need to be able to see the big picture, and then we can narrow it down and decide what we can offer in our own school or animal sanctuary or church or after school program, whatever that may be, even in our household, but starting somewhere.
As we get closer to the finish line of the podcast, I do not want to leave out the animals, because I'm so curious about who your residents are, where they came from, and why you decided to add this element to the mix as well. So tell me about the animals there and the whole setup you've got.
All right. Well, from the beginning of Solid Rock, animals were always part of our learning. Remember, I was not vegan back then. I always believed that allowing students to have experiences with animals, it's one of the very best ways to teach compassion, empathy, patience, and responsibility. Of course, as I evolved, I shifted where and how I did that. So now at this point, I really was completely visiting rescues and sanctuaries at this point. And what was happening with those experiences, which I definitely encourage other schools to do, for us, the problem began that most animal sanctuaries were nowhere local to where we were in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Most sanctuaries were hours away, and they could only host very small groups of students at a time, and only certain ages of students at a time. And so that was difficult because it didn't allow everybody in our school a chance to participate. And then the rescues was very similar. They were good with certain groups of kids coming, but they had to be small groups and certain ages and very limited experience that they could have with the animals there. So when we had really great trips, our students loved it so much, but it just wasn't enough. I couldn't get our kids there often enough. I didn't have as many opportunities available as I really wanted. And so then I thought, why not bring the sanctuary to us? I got to tell you, I probably was a little crazy when I was thinking about this. honestly. This is a really big deal to take on, and it's not something that I would suggest to most schools to do. I really do suggest schools to partner with animal sanctuaries and rescues, and I talk about that in the CHI framework, because there are definitely great ways to do that. But there are some schools that could have their own sanctuaries, and I talk about that also. Because just so you know, I am completely against classroom pets. That is not a way for an animal to live. What I believe in is true animal sanctuary, a space where animals can live freely and safely, and then where students can learn by caring for them. So what we started was our own pilot program, an animal sanctuary. And when we started it, I thought we'd have a few animals on this space that we had to be able to offer our students opportunities to work with some farm animals like pigs, ducks, and turkeys, to be able to teach them about compassion. And we all know that when you're working with farm animals, you start seeing them as your domesticated animals. You start seeing a dog is a pig, is a cat, is a cow, is a chicken, right? You start seeing how they're all the same. And I thought this would be a great way to tie this in with our program. And gosh, it was amazing. It was amazing. We start this little pilot program. We've got a few animals. We call our program SAVE. So it actually becomes, we actually wind up having what you could say two programs. So let me specify what that is. One is SAVE, which stands for Sanctuary for Animals and Veterinary Education. And that is a high school track for students who are interested in careers with animals. So whether it's vet assistants, vet technicians, veterinarians, wildlife rehabbers, animal rights attorneys, whatever it may be, they're getting vocational experiences with animals in this program, and they're in the program every day. Then the animals are there also every day, of course, because they live there, but where the other kids in the school who aren't part of the SAFE program have access to the animals, where they get to go in and read books to the animals and talk to the animals. And guess what? When you have students who don't like to read to their peers or read out loud in class, guess who they will read to? The animals. Kids who are shy and maybe don't really relate well with other kids, they will talk to the animals. It's an amazing situation. So it's just such an organic way for kids to learn compassion, empathy, kindness, patience, respect, hard work, responsibility. It's amazing. So we start this, we're doing it. It's happening, right? We've got all of our kids who get to go over and have time with the animals and have all of these wonderful experiences, and then learn deeply about animals and where they come from and what they need. Then we have this other group of SAVE students who are going to become these amazing, ethical, moral adults who take care of animals. And that's amazing. So we're doing this. And then all of a sudden, I get contacted by the federal government to get involved in wildlife trafficking cases. And all of a sudden, I'm now involved in these confiscation cases where we are going in and helping to rehome wildlife that has been trafficked. I mean, it's unbelievable situations. I don't even know how I'm involved in this, but it's honestly so amazing, and I'm so proud to be part of it. We did a very big wildlife trafficking case 6 months ago, and in this case, we rescued over 70 animals, and lots of primates, wallabies, kangaroos, otters. It was amazing. Some of those animals did come onto our campus. I never would have thought we would have had some of these animals on our campus, but now we do. And that is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. Didn't think we were going this direction, but just sometimes life takes you in another place. And then just recently, we did an amazing rescue with one of the county sheriff's office and animal control. And it was the first time it was ever done in the state of Florida, where the sheriff's office, animal control worked together with a sanctuary so farm animals could be rehomed. Because generally speaking, when farm animals are being confiscated, they are sent to auction. And then, as we know, when they are sent to auction, that means they're being sent to be slaughtered. And so in this case, they were sent to sanctuary, and we helped actually go in, and we safely were able to catch and transport 107 animals, and we found homes for all of them. We did bring some back with us as well, but everybody went to sanctuaries, and it was the first time ever done, and it was a super success. So somehow I'm involved in these really cool situations that to me are so powerful for our students, because our students are part of it. So in the case of the farm animals, they actually, some of the SAFE students were able to go with us to help catch and transport the animals. In the case of the federal government confiscation, we could not take the students on that one with us, but they were getting the property ready, and they were ready for us when we came back with all of the animals, and the veterinarians was there. We actually brought all of the primates back to us, even if they weren't coming to us, because they needed to be vasectomized before they went to their new homes. I mean, it's wild, and our students are part of this. You know, the SAVE students, the pre-vet students, they are there. They are medically part of this whole thing. The other students are there getting enclosures ready, getting food ready. I can't talk enough about this, because then let me tell you something. I did not plan on any of that. So what I just told you was happening was never, ever part of the plan of our sanctuary program. It just went there, and I went there with it. So I don't know what to say about that. I would not suggest that everybody has the ability to do that, or should do that. You have to have a lot of contacts, and you have to be ready to be 100% all in. But it has been some of the most amazing things I've ever been involved in, and watching my students in these situations, watching them rise to these occasions, it has been amazing.
Wow. This is wild, because this is something
Wild.
in the context and the cosmology you've created is like nothing I've ever heard of. It's so unique, Michele. And
we're the only school in the United States doing this. So when you
it's
say
wild.
You've never heard of, it is something you've never heard of, because
Yeah.
we're the only ones doing it.
It's incredible. I know that our listeners will want to dive in more because of how heartfelt and unique and rooted in compassion everything you're doing. So as we wrap here, where are the places you want to direct people to learn more about these incredible frameworks you're creating? Give us the top level stuff of where people can learn more and dig in.
Okay, so if they're interested in involving Chi into anything that they're doing in their classroom or their school or their sanctuary, they could go to chiimpact.org. That's Chi, CHE, impact.org. And they can find out more there. If they are interested in following our school or animal sanctuary on Facebook, or any social media, they can follow the school, Solid Rock Community School, and our website is solidrockcommunityschool.org. And if they're interested in the animal sanctuary, they can go to Sanctuary at Solid Rock on Facebook, or Sanctuary at Solid Rock, all words, .org on social, or on our website. Let's see. Gosh, there's so much. Oh, my YouTube podcast. I mean, the podcast is out everywhere. YouTube seems to have the biggest exposure. That is Plant the Change. And you can see what I'm talking about there. When it's me by myself, I'm talking about education, generally speaking. And then when it is me meeting with others, I'm talking about the work that they are doing. It's influencers and plant-based physicians and people where we have like-minded things going on. And we're talking about ways to transform thinking in this world. Yes, I think that's everything. I know I just forgot something, but
yeah, we'll link to everything in the show notes on the Switch for Good podcast page. And Michele, I just want to thank you for your dedication, your vision, wanting to make this world better, not only for the next generation of kids, but for the earth, the animals, all the reasons you espoused, and just have a lot of deep admiration. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to
Squeeze
interrupt.
it in. Squeeze it in.
Also, if they go to solidrockflorida.org, that one website will actually take them to multiple different things that I'm involved in. And so that can help them locate things maybe a little easier.
Awesome. Thank you, Michele. I hope to come visit someday.
Oh my
We're going to be going out on tour.
When you're coming to Florida, let me know. Then you can jump on my podcast with us in the same room. And then I can take you for a tour of the school and the sanctuary.
Would love that. Looking forward to it.
All right.
Thanks so much for being a guest today.